So let's start with the second part of .NET Best Practice video number 1. In the previous section, we have discussed the basics of Clr Profiler. We have seen the two types of performance metrics which we can get from Clr Profiler. In this section, what we'll do is that we'll take up a sample C# example and we will see that how we can detect high memory consuming functions using Clr Profiler. So here's a simple example which we are going to profile using Clr Profiler. Now this example has two functions. One is using simple strings and the other one is using string builders. Now both of these functions basically concatenate strings 1000 times. Okay, and both of these functions are called from a button click, that is btn do profiling click. So there's a button on the screen which basically calls both of these functions. Now the using simple string function uses the plus concatenation operator to concatenate strings, while the using string builder uses string builder class to concatenate strings. Now what we will do is that we will run this example. We will use the Clr Profiler to detect that from both of these functions, that is using simple strings and using string builders, which of the functions basically consume high memory. So as a first step, let's go and run our Clr Profiler and let's go and browse to our string application. And the time you browse to your string application, it actually starts running the string application. And let's click on check memory allocation. Now if you remember, in our source code we had this button btn do profiling underscore click. That's nothing but this button. So once I've clicked this button, it basically executes both of these functions. So now let's close the profiling and let's see that what we have in our results. In our previous sessions, we have already discussed the two important reports which are given out by Clr Profiler. One report which we get from the histogram button. This report basically tells us that which data type is consuming how much memory. And one report which we get from allocation graph, which tells that which function is consuming how much memory. So at this moment, we need to understand that which function is consuming how much memory. So in other words, we want to know that is using simple string consuming high memory or is using string builders consuming high memory. So let's click on allocation graph. And you will find that it shows the allocation graph basically shows you that which function is called and how much memory is consumed by those functions. And let's click on everything, and you will find here that all the functions which our string builder application is using currently. Now we are only interested in string using simple strings and using string builders. Now both of these functions are called up by btn do profiling underscore click button. So if we are able to locate this function, we will be able to locate using simple strings and using string builders. So let's go and find this function so that we are able to locate the other two functions very easily. So let's again go back to our allocation graph, right click, and let's say find routine, and let's do a control V, and let's do OK. Now you'll find that over here you can see that there is we are able to locate our function, that is btn do profiling underscore click. So let's double click on it. Once you double click on btn do profiling underscore click, you can see all the functions and method calls made through btn do profiling underscore click. In other words, all the functions which are only related to btn do profiling underscore click is now seen. Now there's a problem here. The view is showing that btn do profiling underscore click is calling only one function, that is using simple strings. But if you go to our source code, you will see that btn do profiling underscore click is calling two functions, using simple strings and using string builders. So where has using string builders gone? The view which we are seeing currently are those functions or those methods whose memory allocation is above 1 MB, because we have selected 1 over here. Now let's go back a bit down and say that we want to see more detailed view. And now you can see the using string builders function. Okay, now that we are able to see both of the functions, let's start doing the comparison. We can see that using simple strings is consuming 3.8 MB memory, which is 99.59% of the do profiling click memory. And using string builders function is only consuming 16 KB, that is 0.40% approximately, the 0.40% of the memory allocation. So in other words, using string builders is consuming less memory than using simple strings. Now why is that? Using simple strings is using plus as a concatenation operator to concatenate strings. So what happens with the plus operator is that it creates new copies of string objects in the memory. So in other words, it creates 1,000 copies of string objects or new string objects as the concatenation moves ahead, while string builder only creates one copy of the string builder object. So because of this, you can see that string builder is consuming less memory than simple strings. Now, one of the problems with Clr Profiler is that it gives out a lot of details, and sometimes those details are really not important to us. For example, for our current C# application, we were really interested in these two functions. But if you look at the call graph view, it shows you thousands of functions, which are used internally by .NET or by framework, which it is displaying, and frankly, this will really confuse what we are looking forward for. So what you can do is that you can export the complete sheet into the complete data into an Excel sheet and then see a view. So for that, go to view, go to call graph, go to view and go to call tree. I'm sorry, not to call graph, go to call tree. Now call tree will help you to get an Excel output of the complete allocation graph, and from there you can really zero down to your functions and to your methods and see that which one of them are consuming high memory. So go to view, say all functions, and then say file, save as, and let's give a nice name to it, CSV. Now once you do a CSV save, you'll get a detailed Excel view, something like this. Now again, this Excel view is very detailed, but it's still very easy now to locate down your functions. For example, now I am able to locate my btn do profiling _ click, and I am also able to locate using simple strings, and I am also able to locate using string builders, and I can see that using string builders is consuming 4021974 bytes as compared to 16534 bytes of using string builders. So Excel view can help you to really zero down fast on your functions or on your methods which you are actually looking forward for. Even though the Excel looks very promising, but still it's a tedious task to locate the two functions. For example, for instance, for our example, we had only two functions to be located, and over here the Excel has given us 2000 records. So it's very difficult to locate those two functions from these 2000 records. So Clr Profiler gives us an option where we can enable and disable the Clr Profiler control from the C# application itself. Currently we are only interested in these two functions to profile. So what you can do is that you can use the Clr Profiler controller and enable and disable the Clr profiling activity just before you call these two functions and just before you end these two functions. Now in order to call the Clr Profiler control from your C# application, you need to refer Clr Profiler control DLL, which you can get from the Clr Profiler folder. So once you reference this DLL, you can just call the Clr Profiler control and say that yes, I'm going to just enter the loop for simple strings and string builders, and you need to also say that okay, I want to check for memory allocations, or do you want to only check for method calls. So we have enabled the necessary Clr profiling activity, and once these two functions have done their work, we have gone and we have disabled the profiling activity, and later on at the finally when we are done, we have dumped the heap. So now let's go to a Clr Profiler and let's first disable the profiling activity, because this thing is going to be enabled from your C# application. And now say start the application. Now the time you say start the application, it will start up our application. Just do the check memory allocation button and click finish.